established our Caney Quinto Mundo in Boriken in the year 1993, actually, as part of a vision that I had to find a place for the people. Our purpose here is multiple, right? We advocate for our rights as a people. We caretake this land in an organic manner. We grow coffee and oranges and bananas, and we have some minor fruit crops. We have medicinal plants also established in certain parts of the farm. And we've also taken on the responsibility of planting and ensuring that certain species that are in danger continue to be propagated. And I'm an herbalist as well, and so I attend people from my community and from throughout the island who have heard about me, and they come here for herbal remedies and massages, or santigua, which is what we call it, to the farm. I've also had a series of 2 artists in residence which have come to be on the land and create some art. And in fact, it was a Japanese artist, and while she was here, we talked a lot about the semi, and she is actually a grade school teacher, and she took that back and created her own interpretation of what a semi is with those children, and shared her experience that she had here with us. We've had several visits, an international group of young people who have come to visit and to know and learn about us as a people, and have stayed here from the International Youth Leadership Movement, and they've come and they've done some work here, and we've done some workshops for them in different areas that they've been interested in. And actually the Caney has been host to several thousand people throughout the years. In 1995 we hosted the first encounter, actually I believe since our ancestral times, of indigenous peace elders that gathered here. And during that time we had over 800 people come for that activity. Our purposes here is multiple. The land is here so that we can begin at a certain point in time a yucayeque, o sea, to establish a village. We have many projects that we are working on, like a library. We have a very mini library, but that has been contributed to by UCTP members and Consejo, and a friend of ours who's an archaeologist and a friend has contributed many books to that collection that we make available to Tainos and others who are looking to study our ancestors. And I'm very active in my community. I'm actually the president of the board of special communities, and through that we have brought a major project here to our community of a park that will be a multi-purpose center that will also have places where the children can play basketball and baseball. We'll have a big community room where we can have activities. And the next project that we're working on, which we've already gotten a very positive response, is our community is over 45 minutes away from any medical emergency services, and so we've put together a proposal, and we're bringing what's called un dispensario and a sala de urgencia, which is a cross between an emergency center and a hospital, where the stay is actually no more than 5 days. We brought CPR classes to this community because of the distance between the access to medical services. And many other projects, that I've worked with the community to bring, because we're actually a community that's been very marginalized by the municipality and has actually no services. So that's been my focus in the community. With respect to my work around the rights of our people, we are actually interveners with UCTP and the Consejo and the Caney in a case that we brought against Ondeo and the municipality of Caguas, because they violated and one of our sacred sites, a place where they already knew that our ancestors were buried there, and that fight continues. Right now, the next hearings are scheduled for December 13th. And of course, we're alleging that our basic human rights as a people, as indigenous people of this land, are being violated with respect to our beliefs, with respect to the rights of our ancestors to rest in peace, with respect to, there's laws here that protect the remains from people going and removing them from their resting place. And so we're alleging all of this in this complaint, and we're looking to get the government to either issue an executive order to make the laws, the constitutional and civil laws of Puerto Rico apply to all Taino people here, and also to have them recognize our right to maintain, caretake, and be in control of sacred sites and our ancestral burial grounds. I think that one of the main challenges...
Oh, hold on, we're going to just get 5 seconds so this way we can edit.
Okay. I think that one of the main challenges that face Taino people here on the island is to maintain a unity with our community at large. And why do I say this? The community at large, or those who do not define themselves as indigenous, must not see us as a threat, right? As a threat to who they are. They must begin to see us as part of their community as a whole, which we are, because as many people are aware, we don't have reservations in Puerto Rico. And so all of our families, all of our members are throughout the whole island. And so that's a big challenge, you know, not to be perceived as people or as a Taino people of Boriken that want to separate from the Boricua population, because that is not our goal, right? We are part of this great nation, right? The difference is that we follow our traditional ways. And so they need to see us as part of and not separate from. I think that that's why I work so hard with my community here. And actually, my working with my community here has helped them to recognize their indigenous roots. And so I've also been able to get information actually from many of the people, old timers who are here, the old ones, of their grandmothers, their grandfathers, their parents being Taino. And so what I'm beginning to see in my community is a different perception on a different view of Taino people. And also what I'm beginning to see in my community is how they're linking up to their connection to that ancestral tradition. So I get a lot of sharing. I think that's one of the major challenges. The other challenge, I guess, for us here on the island is maintaining a difference between us and perhaps cultural folkloric groups that are really just dance groups and are not really following the traditional ways. Why is that important? It's important because many of these groups don't always demonstrate or actually educate in the most appropriate way. And so there's a lot of misinformation as a result of that, when people confuse those of us who follow our traditional ways and are in the process of revitalizing our culture, of rescuing that which we already have between us and groups that are just folkloric. So I think that's a great challenge. It's also a challenge when even working with the government, or trying to work, you know, with the government with respect to, again, making these laws, basic human rights laws, basic constitutional laws, basic civil rights laws, apply to us. In their view, we are still relics of the past, and so since we're relics of the past, they feel no inclination to make those laws apply to us, because they see us perhaps as a movement that is not based in reality. I think that they're facing many challenges now, because the recent DNA studies is demonstrating to them that the ones who are in error here are them, right? The recent DNA studies demonstrate that only 12% of the population has what would be classified as Caucasian blood, or European blood, 26% African, and actually almost 63% indigenous. So I think that those are also factors that are going to help with respect to us being able to exercise and make the laws applicable to us. I think that those are great challenges. There are challenges for our children. We've had to fight so that our children's hair can be left long. And so at many different levels, there are challenges. There's challenges with respect to access to our ceremonial sites, because these are seen as tourism and not as our temples and as our ceremonial sites that are like our churches. So those are all challenges that, at least in Taguana Ceremonial Center, we've had some minor successes, but still successes, in the sense that when they see us coming, they aren't as, how would I say, they tend to leave us alone and allow us, the space to do our ceremony, because that's what we go there to do. So we're constantly having to kind of prove ourselves and to show these places where we go that we take these things very seriously, that they are part of who we are, and that then they need to respect that. So those are also challenges, It's also challenging, I think, for any indigenous population today, because of the many colors and our many faces, because of the invasion by the European nations, North America, Spain, the British, the French. I think there's a personal challenge for each and every one of us, where we have to begin to decolonize our hearts, minds, and spirits, so that we don't fall into, the same kind of talk about who is and who isn't, I think that's a challenge. It's a challenge for all of us. And it's interesting, because in one of the books that we were gifted in the library by UCTP is a book that actually demonstrates that the many faces of the people of the islands of the Caribbean, and they are exactly as they are today. There were many different hair types, phenotypes, complexion, stature. So actually today we still reflect who we were even then as a people, with respect to those more stereotypical expectations of others as to what we should look like or how we should be. I think that's also a challenge, is the imposition of stereotypes of how we should be, or who we should be, or how we should be acting as indigenous people today. Again, that's an effort to deny our existence simply because we will drive a car, or because some of us will have a computer. And so these are the challenges that we, on a daily basis have to face. Being looked at sometimes in strange ways, the same challenges I think that all the people throughout all the different indigenous nations have, the same similar challenges with government and with neighbors, or with others who are there, who don't consider themselves indigenous. Okay, some of the lasting traditions that we'll find still in the mountainside, o sea, in the mountainous regions of Puerto Rico, because that too is fading in the lowlands or in the metropolitan centers, is this sense of when you go to someone's house, that their house is truly your house, that you're welcome there, that immediately you are fed and you are taken care of, and that you see here. When I first moved here, I came and I was here for the first year alone because my husband had to stay behind in order to, economically support the beginning phases of the Caney. And I was immediately adopted by Doña Carmen. And since I was living alone, she made it her business to send her sons, her grandsons around to make sure that I was okay. She knew that after a hard day's work in the farm that I probably would go to bed without eating because I was too tired, and so she would send me food. And so this is all part of our tradition, this is part of what would happen when a visitor came, right, or someone moved into one of our villages. Everyone would help to make sure that that person had what they needed. At another point in time, Doña Gigi, I didn't have a place to stay because I hadn't yet found, a little house that I could rent. Well, she allowed me to stay in her home. She didn't know me. I was an absolute stranger, but yet she allowed me to stay almost about 6 months, I think, in her home while I looked for housing. And she also, made it her business to take care of me, to make sure I ate, and even in the way things are cooked, people still cook in los fogones, the outdoor cooking areas. In the mountain place, we still, you'll come during coffee harvest and you'll smell the roasting of the coffee in the fogon over an open fire. The cooking ways are still very much traditional, where the root crops and those kinds of things are an important part of our diet. The traditional foods. We have a family here of about 30 people. There's a road that is not a community road, it's their road. And this is a family that is the mother, the father, the grandmother, the sons, the daughters, and the wives, and their children. So that is really like a yucayeque. And so you see that, you see the tradition of if something is wrong, an elder here gets sick, someone goes out and makes sure that the elder's being taken care of. Or, for example, we found out that there was an elder in need, very, very sick, and no one had gone, and so we went and immediately we got him medical attention and care. And so you see that in the mountain region, but you don't see that anymore in the metropolitan, like in San Juan. It's not the same. It's not the same kind of connection. Most of the families in this area are actually related somehow, cousins or whatever, but they all come from families, in many instances, who were the working force of the hacendado. O sea, in many ways, the slaves of the hacendado of this area, which was the Figueroa family. And so you see that they have maintained and they stay within this community. Many of the healing tradition, the herbs, are still used. Doña Rona, who is an elder that would work with me in the greenhouse, taught me about a red leaf plant that is something that's used for upset stomach, any kind of upset stomach, and you make it tea and immediately you find this relief. I learned from, I believe it was Doña Carmen, that if ever you're in an accident and there's severe bruising, well, you take 3 pavona red flowers and you make a tea out of that, and that will help dissolve that inner bruising. And so you see many of the herbal tradition, many of the cooking traditions, the way in which you'll still see grandmothers, grandfathers There's a family here. The grandfather is over 100 years old, and he lives with his daughter. And then his great-grandchildren live next door. So you see, that kind of extension, that family, that extended family is very much alive here. Most of the people here are caretaking their mothers and their fathers, and the grandchildren help. And so those kinds of things are alive and well in the mountains,
Just like a message,
I think that
Ready?
a message that I would like to send out to all my Taino brothers and sisters is the message of the need for them to return home. The message of the need for them to know their mother here. A message to them to come and become real familiar with the smells and the sounds and the taste of their homeland. And the rhythms of this land, which are very different from the north and from other parts of the country. I think it's important for every Taino to come back home and to lay their hearts upon the Earth Mother here, to really get in touch with her. Because I truly believe that the only way the prophecy will come to fulfillment, to its complete fulfillment, is when all of the children of this land come back home and take the time out to know their mother here. There's always a need for some of us to be in the States and in other places, to be there to advocate and to defend and to help others begin to know who they are. But one of the most important things, I think, for the Taino community is to come home and is to learn the rhythm again, and is to really live the life, the ancestral life, in the most complete way that they can. As a people, that is what will bring us, will revitalize, will help us to rescue that which is still left. But without the people on the land, then where is the Taino? So I think that's important. And again, even for other nations, I support strongly, and I think that all of us must support strongly that struggle for the lands of indigenous people, because that is our connection. That is who we are as a people. And so we must support this. And we see that throughout all of the world, indigenous people's lands and their ways are being, taken from them. And so I would, again, just instill in the hearts and the minds of all indigenous people that we must continue to struggle for that land. We must continue to struggle against the pollution and the contamination. And we must continue to struggle to have our ancestors respected, and to have our languages and our ways respected, and to keep them going. That's what we as a Taino people are struggling now with, to rescue and to revitalize our language, to learn it, to pass it on. And so, I instill in other indigenous people, don't allow that, to happen. Don't lose that.
One thing I think is important that we have to get also is that, because you explained the prophecy, but some people don't know about it. Maybe you could just talk about what the prophecy of Aurasure is, the Guimasoa, and that part, so we'll get that on tape, and then that'll be it.
The prophecy of the reemergence of the Taino nation came to Aurasure, who we understand was the daughter of El Cacique Hayuya. That prophecy talks about a time of, or it's called the time of the Guimasoa. The time of the Guimasoa was a time of invisibility. The time when the ancestors spoke about how the overgrowth of weeds and vines would be so dense over our basic roots that we as a people wouldn't even recognize ourselves anymore. That all of these different energies that had come to our lands, the energy of division and strife and wars and violence, would eventually make us forget. But it also speaks of a time when we would begin to remember, and that we would begin to read and unearth our roots, and the people would re-emerge from what is called the Guimasoa, invisibility. And actually you can see that process happening from about maybe the 70s, 80s, when, at least in the 80s, groups began to emerge and people began to openly reclaim their indigenous roots, because actually in many families, as we all know, that was kept alive, but it was kept alive and quiet, right? And many of us weren't allowed to speak about it. But already in the 70s, 80s, we see, especially in the 80s, the emergence of groups that were reclaiming their indigenousness, right? Their Taino-ness in the States, here in the island. And actually, if you look at our history, one of, at least of our time, one of our greatest warriors, if I can use that word, for Don Pedro Albizu Campos, who was a figure, he was the father of our nation, actually. And, you know, he claimed his indigenousness, and he fought for the liberation of this country and of the people. He fought for the independence, and he always maintained throughout the harassment, throughout all of the torture that he had to endure while he was jailed for his beliefs. He maintained that we were to be a free people. And we have many, you know, from our caciques throughout the whole history of the island of Puerto Rico. We have many caciques that went to the courts of the Academia Real, or it was a court that was set up by the Spaniards, and they fought for the liberation. They argued for the liberation of their people, themselves and their people, and there are recorded stories or documents that show that, you know, this struggle has been there. Certainly quiet, because once they did that, they disappeared from the rolls of Spain, right? They're no longer heard about, which is what's happened to many of us. You know? And so the Guimasoa speaks of the time when people would begin to speak very openly, and we would see the many people as we do now, and more every day. That we see many groups emerging, and that's becoming the fulfillment of the prophecy. But again, those in the diaspora need to come home. They need to do that.
Great.